The Monday Maydayology podcast by Hasty Fire Products, home of the Hasty Rescue Strap, the game-changing rapid intervention tool. All right, thanks for joining us on another episode of the Monday Maydayology podcast. Today I have with me Jonathon Dallalio from Farmers Branch, Texas, or at least that was the department. I'm not sure if that's actually where you're from. So Jonathon, he's coming to us with 12 years of experience in the fire service, and he did the last 10 with the Farmers Branch Fire Department. It's a suburb outside of Dallas. He held the rank of driver operator, and he experienced a Mayday event at an incident, which obviously he's going to talk about. But before we get into that, Jonathon, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And for the listeners out there, this is the first guy that I don't know, right? So I've never met him. I reached out to him online after I heard about his story and thought this would be a good one that, we can all learn from. So I reached out, and this is actually going to be my first time hearing his story as well, other than the brief introduction we had before we hit record. So thanks for joining us, man, and tell the audience whatever it is that you want them to know about you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Like you said, my name is Jonathon. I work for the Farmers Branch Fire Department. I worked there for 10 years. I had 2 years of volunteer experience before that. I had an interesting, come up into the fire service, but I fell in love with it relatively early, and I think it's the greatest job in the world. And there's a lot that can be learned in each and every day, each and every shift. And that's why I came on this podcast. I'm no longer a fireman. The injuries I sustained in the accident, it caused me to medically retire. Actually, October of 23, I medically retired from the Farmers Branch Fire Department. Farmers Branch is a little city just outside of Dallas, and I grew up right one city north of there in Carrollton, Texas, and which is going to play a little bit into this story of what happened. But I grew up in the area. I spent most of my life there, and I tried very hard to get on in that area because that was just where I was from, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to share my story, and hopefully there's some things that you all can take from it. But I don't know how much you want to go into how I started, but
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
there's there's um there's a lot of people that poured into me at a little city called Oak Point where I volunteered, which was north of where I was at, and I I I got into the fire service I went to junior college and played some baseball. And that wrapped up, and I was either going to go and continue and go and get a degree in something I didn't want to do, and I knew firefighting was something that I had caught the bug, and so that was in the it was 0809 when I finished fire school, and we were coming out of recession, and there just wasn't a whole lot of jobs. I broke my wrist. I went to paramedic school, and I was struggling to find jobs, just like a lot of people you know, in my class were. We were trying to get on at a good department, and you weren't picky. I remember we would test at 10, 15 different places before we get hired, but I broke my wrist, and so I decided to go to paramedic school because I couldn't test anymore. And then not long after that, I got hired on with Farmers Branch, and I started there. My first shift, I remember I was at Station 1. We only had 3 stations. Farmers Branch touches the north side of Dallas. It's 12 square miles, 3 stations, landlocked, with a lot of variety for the size of our city. We got million square foot tilt wall, flat roofs, warehouses to townhomes to high rises to mid-rise apartments to thousand square foot houses that have been there for 60, 70 years, ranchettes off the road, mansions, ranch style homes. There's just a lot of diverse and unique situations in Farmers Branch.
Yeah, it sounds like
Along with,
that's a lot of stuff to kind of pack into. What did you say it was 12
yep,
square miles?
12 square miles.
Wow.
On one side, we have like a warehouse district. And then on the other side, on the Dallas side where the tollway runs, we got a few buildings that were 10 to 20. I think the tallest building's 26 stories, but we do have a lot of apartments. We got an Omni hotel. I think it's like 14, 15 stories. A couple of them like that are big, unique scenarios and things you got to train on. But we had 3 stations, and when I started at a station that had probably between 6 guys there full time. Like, there was 3 on a quint and 3 on an engine when we first started, like minimum staffing. But when we got hired on, the staffing started bumping up on the quints to 4. And I will say that I had some invaluable people pour into me. Guys with 30. There was, I think, 3 guys at the day I started with 30 years experience each, and they poured into me. I had a tailboard that was at that station who just retired, and he retired with 28 years. So about that time, he was 20 years in. So, and he's one of the most handy guys you ever met. He could figure out any problem. He was smooth, but he was smart and strong. Just an all around great fireman. His name's Jeff Tucker. If you say that name around Farmers Branch, everybody knows. 20 years ago to 20 years from now, people will still remember that name. But he poured into me, in the first year of my career, and we became good friends, and we started hanging out outside the department. But he's teaching me not just the ways of Farmers Branch, but how to be a fireman. And I began to emulate him, and just as a young guy, as you're supposed to do, in my opinion, is find out who the guys are that do it the right way, and just watch everything they do. As a young guy, sit back, watch, listen.
Yeah, man,
And
100%.
that's what I tried to do. Those guys, I mean, they were older guys. They didn't get out and physically train, but they talked about almost every call. How would y'all got? Y'all see anything? Yeah, you go over to this house. If you go to that house again, watch out for this. And that's what I did. I just tried to soak up as much as I could, and that laid the foundation for the rest of my career. Him, a lot of good officers. There was a lot of good officers at Farmers Branch that poured into me, and one's still there. His name's Captain Brian LaFleur. He's still there. You'll start seeing him around on podcasts. He's starting to gain some notorieties on some fronts, especially locally in the DFW area, as a guy who knows his stuff. But he had been a captain for, I mean, if he had been there for 25 years, he'd probably been a captain for 10, and he's a student, and he still is. And he pours into young guys, and those guys really did. There's countless others that did, but for the most part, you know, I I was never afraid to train. I was never afraid to get them, put the work in, and I always wanted to be what I guess any good fireman wants to be, is when they walk away at the end of their career, they want to be known as a guy that could be reliable and just an all-around good fireman. And that was
Absolutely.
a legacy. That was a legacy I was trying to get to, right? So
Well, it sounds like you had a really good foundation from the start, man. Like
for
a
sure.
bunch of good dudes who really wanted to mentor you and make sure that you were successful. So you can't
Hmm.
ask for anything better than that.
For sure, for sure. And I think, I mean, when you look at some departments and you look at the strength of their fire department, it comes down to what kind of effort the guys with experience are putting into the younger guys. And I think you can see a direct correlation when you look at an apartment and how it's how it's coming along, so to speak, or how it's turning over, because the fire department's continually turning over with new guys and the old guys retiring and moving on. I think that 100% taking young guys and putting in the time, even though they may not there may be a generational gap there, and I think that the fire department's seeing that now, with there being the blue collar guy that used to be
Yeah.
the run of the mill fireman. You know, when you think of old school New York and you think of all these old departments, these guys were just roughnecks, right? They just loved to work. And now the departments are going more towards, like, how smart are you? You know, and I'm not saying that I think that the departments, they value an education a lot more than they value a guy that is mechanically sound and loves to work. And I think there's just a disconnect from some of the older guys to some of the new guys coming in, and that the way that they do things is different. And I'm thankful that I was blessed to have guys that looked past, our differences and just wanted to make sure that I knew what to do.
Mhm.
And that's basically it. But
I think every
that's
generation kind of has that, right? From one to the other.
hmm
Every generation always says that about the new ones coming up, that they're, whatever, they're lazy or they're dumb or whatever the case is.
hmm
I'm a fire service instructor. I teach in my department at our academy, and then I travel and I teach with a training group. And I've definitely noticed it as well, especially the last probably 4 years. It's really gotten to the point where we're getting a lot of guys who are joining the service that have never done anything physically or like mechanically, right? Like this
hmm
is we're now getting people hired in my department who are legitimately the video game generation or the iPad generation. You know what I mean? Like from the time that they were young, they weren't out swinging hammers and turning wrenches with their dad for whatever reason. And that's our generation's struggle to teach them because they're different. It doesn't make them bad, in my opinion, right? So
hmm
what I try to tell some of our other instructors, I'm like, we have to change our outlook and our mindset. Like we got to figure out how to reach these people. These guys, they're not shitbags just because they're different than us. In
hmm
terms of like how they were brought up, uh, it's not their fault that their dad never showed them how to run a chainsaw, right? It's our
Yeah.
job to do that now, And that's not even the whole point of this podcast, but I'm glad you brought it up because that's something that I'm pretty passionate about, even
Yeah.
outside of the Mayday stuff.
Yeah, for sure. But if you're ready, we'll dive into the day that it all kind of came crashing down. No pun intended. So
Yeah, so what
uh,
what station were you at?
I was at Station One, which is the centrally located station in Farmers Branch.
And was that a Quinton engine house as well?
Well, we had transitioned, and we were actually operating with a truck, with a four-man truck, and we had evolved in the 10 years that I was there. We went from a three-man Quint, and then we bought a truck, and then we staffed the truck, and then we trained as a truck,
I
and
got you.
so
And so
yep.
you were
At
on the
that
truck?
time, I was
Okay.
not on the truck that day. We had an engine and a truck at Central.
So did you guys rotate then between the engine and truck? You weren't hard staffed on one unit?
Kind of. I was the engine driver, and we were going through a transition phase where we had started staffing a battalion driver. And the reason some departments don't have a battalion driver, but Farmers Branch is unique in that it's got four cities that touch each other, and we run a dispatch with each other because I mean, the cities intertwine, and so it just got to the point where they were like, "Hey, in order to better serve the whole community, we got to start running together." And so, used to when I first started, we would run to the three other cities for big stuff like fires. We would always be like a second alarm, or we may go if they were understaffed. But it was not uncommon for us to have a structure fire, and we would have three different cities there working, and that kind of made Farmers Branch unique. But that the battalion chiefs needed drivers, so the department decided to make those drivers captains that were wanting to promote to battalion chief. So the captains at each station were taking turns rotating into the battalion, and
Okay.
they were training. So on engine 1, that is the most opportune time, and they put guys on engine 1 that are looking to promote, I mean, as drivers, looking to
Mm-hmm.
promote to be an officer, because that's really the most opportune time to ride up and get the most experience. So I was getting, at the time, I felt like 1 in every 3 shifts I was stepping up as an officer on engine 1, which is the busiest engine in the town. But when you run structured fires, you're almost always there with the truck. So if you needed help there, and you were almost never there first up, first in, you almost always had either a medic that came with you for more manpower, or showed up to a fire at the same time as you. So it's a good spot to learn as a young guy wanting to be an officer. And generally the younger captains rode engine 1, because, the older guys are, I'm not running a bunch of medical calls. I just, put me on an engine, or put me on a truck, and I'm gonna be a truck captain, just like every department. The
Yeah.
older heads generally move on, and they just want to fight fire, want to do heavy rescue, things of that nature. And the younger captains normally were at station 1 on engine 1.
So the day of your incident, what was the date of that?
That was October 2022.
Yeah, man, let's get into it.
On that day, I was riding up as the officer. I had a driver that was hired about 2 months after me, so we had about the same amount of experience. And then a tailboard, he had about 3 years experience, but it was a unique situation. It was a perfect day. I mean, it was probably 65 degrees, if I'm remembering correctly, in September. And it was sunny, no clouds. Like, we would have trainings every now and then, because, like I said, this is an integral part. We would have trainings where we had a training tower in District 3, which is on the complete opposite side of town of where the fire happened. And our truck was down there along with engine 2. So we went to the other side of town because there was nobody over there. And so oftentimes when they would do trainings like this, they'd send an engine over there just to fill in. So we were filling in at Station 2. It's mid-morning, and our truck is also at the training. So on that side of town, it's just us, and our medic is at our station. So we're at Station 2, our medic's at Station 1, and we caught a structure fire. And so we're going out. I put my bunker pants on, and everyone tells you about how things just kind of snowball, but I was trying not to, let anything like that happen. We didn't have a garage door opener, so I was letting the engine pull out, and as soon as the engine pulled out, I hit the garage door and I ran, hopped in, put my seatbelt on. I finished getting bunked out with my seatbelt. Of course, we're in a side of town that we don't work, so we know where the fire's at, because we can see a column of smoke. And I have the computer up, and the unique situation is there was only 2 ways into this neighborhood. This neighborhood's like a really one way in, but 2 streets to get to that one way, one from the north and one from the south. Well, we're coming from the south going north, and it's probably only 3 miles away, as you drive, but there was probably 9 turns, because you can see the column of smoke, and I'm telling the driver where to go, because it's just hard to get to. So we take off, and we drive for about 2 miles on the main road, and I'm already buckled up. I'm already fully bunked with my SCBA on, and then I'm telling him left here. Hey man, it's coming up right here. All we're doing is driving through a neighborhood. We drove through like 2 or 3 neighborhoods just to get to the house that's on fire. And so, meanwhile, I'm young. I'm like, all right, just calm down, take deep breaths, and that's all I was trying to do. Is I always enjoyed trying to sound as calm as possible on the radio. Like, I wanted to be very professional in that manner. And so we pull up, and it is a massive, like 6,000 square foot home. And it's set off the road or off the driveway. Is the driveway? It was probably 75 feet. And so when we pulled up, I give a size up, tell the tailboard, we got, go ahead and grab a hand line. We're going to start putting water on the fire from the outside because it was, when we pulled up, we had fire showing from the Bravo side, smoke showing. We could see flames from where we parked the engine. Excuse me. And the medic that was from Station 1 had pulled up just before we did. They didn't give a size up, but the medic's not expected to give a size up. They just say, hey, we got to confirm structure fire. So they got there. There was a car in the way, and when we pulled up, we pulled a hand line. They were trying to get that car, and it was a nicer car, so they were trying to get it out of the way. The homeowners were out of the house, and so I gave the best blue card size up that I could, and I'm sure it's terrible, but I was starting to do a 360, and I walk around we saw the Charlie side, and then the front, obviously, and I moved around to the Bravo, and I walked all the way around to the back. I checked the back. I saw where we had fire showing. But one thing caught my eye. There was a dormer on the very top. It was a two-story, but the dormer was on the very top of the house, on the same side of where the fire was showing. And there was the thickest, blackest smoke, heavy pressure, just pouring out. So I'm like, all right, we got attic involvement in my mind is what I'm thinking. And I told you that we have three other cities that run with us mutually for mutual aid. We had a Quint from Addison, which is the city just north of us. They showed up about a minute and a half after us. So we already are started to flow a little bit of water on the exterior, just kind of getting a knockdown. We deploy hand lines like that on a regular basis, just try to get a knockdown before we go interior. And the battalion, Addison's battalion, showed up. I transferred command, and I said, hey, engine 131's going interior. So my driver, he's pumping. I have my tailboard, and I pick up one of the medics because we blocked the medic in. They weren't going anywhere. He was bunked out. We took them out of service, and I took one of that crew member. The other guy, he was the one that was moving the car, and he couldn't get fully bunked out. But the other guy had got bunked out, and so me, Buck, and Peyton Burton. So Burton and Buck, they were my tailboards, both very fit, capable, young tailboards that everyone has trust in. So, at this point, I don't have any doubts. I want to get inside. I want to take a hose line. I want to cut the fire off, and then keep it from burning the roof off. So we went in the garage, which this was a detached shed. I'm sorry, to the house along with the garage. Well, that's where the fire originated, in that shed. We went in the garage, and of course we walked in, and there's no smoke. It's real clear inside the structure. So I go around right to the other side of the wall where the shed butts up to built onto the house, and there's no penetration there. And so I was like, all right, we'll keep working. We work around to the main occupancy of the structure, and it's a big living room. Like I said, it's 6,000 square foot home. There was catwalks on the second floor landing that goes all the way around the living room. So we got a big open living room with catwalks that go around upstairs. In the back of the living room, the stairs go to the second floor. You can see it all from the front door. Like, you open up these two big double front doors, you can see the stairs to the second, and then you can see it all. So we noticed right away there's no handrails on the stairs, on any of the banisters, no banisters up on top, no handrails to keep you from falling off. And we came to find out that they were under renovation, and the contractor couldn't get the decorative handrails that were needed to finish the job, so they just left them down. Anyway, it was noted. I think the Addison captain had radioed, hey, we got no handrails in here, just letting the crews coming behind us. So we go to the second floor. I go to that wall. We have to get the hand line up there, and I find the room that has a little bit of haze. And I pulled ceiling coming down the hallway because you went up the stairs, and then you had to walk back around to the Bravo side. The stairs went from the Bravo side up to Charlie's side, and then you had to walk around the catwalks to get to that back corner. I got to the room, and we had the hand line, and it was already getting to where you really couldn't see in that room. There was enough smoke to where you couldn't. So I got the tick out, and I could see, okay, here's it's hot right here. So I start pulling out the drywall and exposing it, and as soon as I broke through, you could feel the heat coming in. And so I stepped back, and the tailboard's right behind me with the nozzle. I'm like, hey, we're gonna start flowing, hit it here. So he starts flowing water, and of course, there's nothing to tie off to keep the hose from falling off. And he was about, I want to say, 4 or 5 feet from the opening to really be able to get the hand light in there and start extinguishing the fire. So I said, y'all stay here. And I went down, and I tried to pull more hose up. So I'm trying to pull more hose up. We had crews flooding in at this point. They tried to cut a hole, and obviously they thought that just like I did, they thought that there was there was fire in the attic. So they sent a crew up to the roof, and they cut a hole. Well, they cut the hole, and I'll get to the reason, but the hole didn't do anything. There was no ventilation there, and they couldn't figure it out. We couldn't figure it out. But I couldn't get any more hose. I couldn't pull the engine any closer to the house, and we had just come up 4. So by the time I got back, I said, just keep flowing water. And I stood at the door with my pike pole across there because I knew if it got real hot, they were going to be bailing out. And so I was just standing at the door. I didn't want them coming out of that room because the room's right here. And then, sorry for putting my hands in. The room is right here. And you come right out the room. If you walked and you didn't know you were walking out the door, you walk right off the second floor. So I was standing at the doorway, just making sure my crew didn't come out. Well, by the time that I got back up there, I may have sat there for maybe a minute, and I hear my tailboard's vibe alert go off. And before I could get anything out of my mouth, we run into each other. He comes out, boom. It was Dallalio, I'm out of air. I'm like, I hear that. And so I said, give me the nozzle. I get the nozzle, and I tell Buck and Burton to start. I said, stay on the wall and work back to the stairs, and I'll meet you. Do not, don't cross over trying to find the stairs. I said, stay on the wall and work towards the stairs. I'm coming. Because I wanted to hand the hose line off to the captain. There's a captain that I was trying to find. Because at this point, smoke is, now that we've penetrated the drywall, smoke's now in the house.
Yeah.
And it's from, floor to ceiling. Not hot. It's not hot in all the house, but in the room we were in, it was hot. So it's just smoke banked all the way to the floor. And I hand the hose line off to another captain. I said, hey, this is your only hose line, because to my knowledge, I don't think that they had another hose line in the structure at this point. And we probably had, I want to say there was five or six crews on that second floor, So as they're walking, I hand the hose line off, and I got probably 3 or 4 steps down the wall. I'm trying to catch up to my crew. I tripped on something, and it was all tile floor. And I just kind of, you're walking lazily. I don't know if it was a tool or somebody's foot, but I just kind of stumbled. And when I stumbled, my other foot slipped out from under me, and I toppled over onto the first floor, and I landed right on the stairs in a seated position. When I landed on my butt, my knees hit my face mask, and my face mask, pushed off my face, but my helmet held it down, and it just knocked all the air out of me. I knew right then that there was something wrong in my back, like I got shocked or something, down my legs. And so I pulled my mask back on, and before I could get my mask on, I think part of it, everyone knew, in the back of their mind is, don't fall over, don't go off that. And when they heard me fall, they knew exactly what happened. right?
Yeah.
So I got my mask back on. I'm reaching for my radio, and I hear, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. We got a unknown fireman has fell from the second floor, and so before I could get on the radio and just tell them who it was, once I caught my breath and I was back on air, I was reaching for it. My battalion chief, I just remember, I didn't know it at the time, but he had come up and he said, "Hey, where are you hurt?" And I said, "My back." And he goes, "You want me to drag you by your hands or your feet?" And I said, "My hands." And so he pulled me along with another fireman there was another fireman stationed at the top of the stairs, making sure that people could find the stairs to get down. And he had heard me, and he just came down the stairs and he dragged me out. And from the time I fell to Mayday being, I think it was like a minute and 30. But it was just kind of, they were going to have to walk over me either way, once they knew that I was on the first floor in a pretty easy location. But my battalion chief, who he was stationed at the front of the structure, and he was safety over the front. So he'd got there, and at one point he could see plenty. So he had a lay of the land. He knew what it looked like inside. And when he heard me hit, he knew a general area. I think he said he could just kind of see me hit the ground, or he saw where I was at, and he just walked in. It was probably like 25, 35 feet in where I was at, and he just dragged me out. But they got me outside, and you know, I was cognitively there, so I was just like, guys, take y'all's time. In my mind, I'm just like, just chill, guys. I'm okay. My back's tore up, but I'm gonna live. I'm not in need of resuscitation or anything like that. So that's what I was thinking. And but yeah, there really was no RIT activation. They were starting to get it, but I was out faster than they can have a RIT team
Yeah.
deployed, and that's about it. They loaded me up, and they had to walk me about 2 blocks to the ambulance, because this was like, you drive in one way into this neighborhood, and there was only one way out. And of course, firemen come bailing in, and all the trucks are stacked in
Yep. It's
on the
all clogged
ambulance.
up.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
so they had to walk me. It was like a parade walking down the street, and they walked me all the way to the ambulance, and it felt like it was 600 yards. I don't know how far it was from the structure where the ambulance was at, but another city. They were the ones that transported me to the hospital. But there's just a lot of things that went into the incident that made it to where I fail. And in my opinion, there was some things we could have, like, we probably should have just kept extinguishing the fire from the exterior for a little bit longer, trying to knock it down and see if the conditions changed in the attic, or what we thought was the attic. But come to find out afterwards, they had added that. I think they added the built-on shed, and with that, they had put either some sort of exhaust from the shed through the walls with no fire block all the way up to the attic. Well, that was just one little channel that ran all the way up to that dormer. So
Mm.
all the exhaust from that shed just ran up and made it appear as if it was pressurized smoke in the attic, and it was just coming out of that one single dormer vent. That's just kind of. I was trying to listen, to the things that I was taught. Hey, I'm gonna, if you got fire impinging, it's contained right now, but it's about to make it in the structure, and if it makes it in the structure, we're gonna lose the whole thing. In my mind, this was a pretty simple, shed fire that was about to take the whole house, and that was what we were trying to eliminate, kind of like an apartment fire. You want to
Yeah.
maybe once it gets in the attic, you got to go 2-3 doors down to cut it off, right? And in my mind, those are the things, and the things that I'd seen in my past, and the things that officers had poured into me as tactics in which are successful, is to cut the fire off. It's once it's made in the attic, you got to get in front of it to push it back to where the origination of the fire started. So it's kind of weird deal how it all happened. But I think that if I didn't fall, there was a good chance that someone else may have. And I don't know if y'all's department or your departments are the same as ours, but we're gung ho just like every department.
Hmm.
We get a structure fire. We want to be first. We want to be able to extinguish the fire. We want a good job to do while we're there. We don't want to be the crew that ends up getting left out on deck. So that is I think, a part of a problem that may be nationally, maybe not. And that's just, we got these structures that are on fire, and we just keep sending crews, keep sending crews, keep sending crews. And the crowded nature of the second floor was definitely a major hazard, that contributed to me falling. I don't know if I didn't fall. I think someone else may have, because, we were on a slippery surface. It was tile. We were flowing water on a second floor with no fail safe.
Yeah, that
And
seems like it's inevitable, right?
yeah,
If you're in
yeah,
there long enough, somebody's going to go over.
hmm yeah.
Is
But
is that construction type or layout, whatever you want to call it, with the catwalks and stuff like that? Is that something that's common in that
no,
area?
this was a completely custom home in a neighborhood where every house was different. They were all custom homes built to spec, and that's how this house was.
That makes it hard to plan
Uh,
for, you know?
exactly. I had honestly, I had only seen that house from the exterior. I'd never been inside of it. I'd been in some other houses in there, and they're all just massive houses on pretty big lots for being in a city our size. I think that lot was probably almost 3/4 acre, which, I mean, it was a massive house on a big lot off the street. And, hindsight, I wish we'd have taken more hose. I wish, we would have continued to flow water from the exterior, just that the fire really hadn't impinged the structure. It was on an exterior wall with a built-on shed, and it was contained to that area, other than that one exhaust pipe running to the dormer. And so, I mean, those are things that, I mean, even if you were to pre-plan that house, you wouldn't have known,
Yeah.
okay, there's a channel running from this all the way up through the attic and out that dormer. I mean, there's no way you would have been able to see that. And I think just me being nonchalant walking through, a hazardous environment, um, that that's what is to blame. If I was hugging that wall, I had a hand on the wall just walking. If I was hugging that wall a little tighter, maybe I didn't slip. It's just something I think about often. But I think that, you know, there's got to be a happy medium. You have to be calm, you have to be cool, you have to be collected, but you can't take things for granted. And that, I think that's probably what got me, is I was just, all right, we're gonna make it back out. We're gonna go down here. I'm gonna report, and I'm gonna tell them what I got, and then we're gonna knock this thing down. In my head, I'm like, hey, we're not getting much here. Let's go ahead and just start backing people off the second floor. Let's just put the fire out here. When I just stumbled a little bit and I slipped, I just tumbled right off like Humpty Dumpty, I guess. But it happened. We can't change it, but we can try to learn from it. We had crews ready, and they were on deck. And in Blue Card, there's really not a RIT designation. If you're on deck, you're the RIT crew. Bunked up, you're ready to go. You are the RIT crew. We just call it. You go on deck. Some like I said, we got cities that work with each other. We're all Blue Card certified. And I think that we were prepared if I was incapacitated mentally to not be able to, respond. And if I didn't have someone that was standing outside that knew exactly where I'd fell, because, it made the extrication of me from the structure very easily uh, accomplished, in that the floors were all hard. It was either I don't think there's any carpet in that whole structure, so pulling me across the floor was easy. It was all just uh, for me falling. The Everything went really smoothly. Like, there's not really anything you can learn from that, other than you gotta, if you're in charge of something, be aware, have your head on a swivel, be watching. All right, what's the structure look like now that we can see in it? Because in 5 minutes we won't be able to. And luckily my battalion chief was doing just that. Like, he was standing there, safety, kind of getting the lay of the land, and he knew what everything looked like. So when I fell, he knew exactly where I was at, and he picked me out. And I mean, some people call it for, may have said, well, he was freelancing or this or that. He was just, he's just coming to the aid of someone in need. And he was not disciplined in our department. He was, he received reward awards for his bravery, his ability to think quickly, and his actions, helped me get out of the structure way faster than if we assembled a RIT crew, told them where I was at, deployed the RIT crew,
Yeah, yeah,
they come get me,
absolutely.
you know what I'm
Yep.
saying? But I mean, they would have needed a RIT crew if I had fallen, hit my head, or, if he wasn't there, because if I'd have fallen the other side of the stairs, there was like a fake tree that went all the way to the second floor. And it was a big, probably 24 inches in diameter, an old deadwood. It was a weird thing, but it was right there. I could have fallen on that, and that thing could have fallen onto the stairs and blocked the stair. It could have been a lot of things that went wrong. But looking back, I mean, there's things we could have done different. I could have been better in a lot of aspects that you know would have changed the situation. But
Yeah, I mean
you
that's
know,
that's every call we go on, right? There's always
for
something you
sure,
can do better. I wouldn't beat yourself up over it too bad, you know.
nah,
Listening to, I mean, honestly, man, like listening to your tactics and the reasoning for trying to justify the tactics that you chose. Like, I can't think of. I mean, obviously, I don't know the house and everything, but I don't think I would have done much different than you at all. You know, from the beginning, you're trying to go to where it appears the seat of the fire is, and you're going to put water on it until there's no more fire, right? So,
hmm
um, no, man, I can't blame you much for that. One thing I do want to point out, to circle back a little bit, you said as soon as you fell, somebody called a mayday for you.
hmm
Um, I think that's really good, and I don't know. You can speak on this if you'd like. I don't know what your department's RIT and Mayday policies or trainings or anything like that are, but you know, the vast majority of people who experience a Mayday are not rescued by a RIT team. They are rescued by people inside. And one of the things that I've noticed teaching is you have to you have to kind of let students know, especially in the beginning of their RIT training, like it is okay to call a Mayday for somebody else. Like you don't have to call it for yourself. So the fact that somebody else operating in there noticed the issue, called the Mayday, and then they were at your side almost immediately, I think that's great. You know what I mean? Like I said, I don't know
hmm
what your all's RIT training is all about, but it sounds to me like the crew's operating right alongside you did a pretty bang up job with that.
for sure, and we have the same protocols. If you feel as if someone is in danger, lost, or trapped, or incapacitated, you have an obligation to look out for them.
Yeah.
And pride didn't get in the way of, and I think that's part of it. Like guys are like, are they really? Do I want to cause this commotion? Do I want to, in that situation, when there's like something on the gray area? This was no gray. I think this was all in the back of their minds. Hey, somebody's about to fall off this thing. And then when I fell, they knew exactly what had happened because I mean, I hit the floor just as it's a strong thud, and then I was like I got hit by Mike Tyson. I mean, he's fighting tonight, but I felt like the wind just left me, and I couldn't even. The mask came off my face, and I didn't breathe any smoke because I was still just pouring out. But they knew exactly what had happened, and they didn't hesitate. Like legit, I put my mask back on, and I'm reaching for my radio, and I'm trying to grab my radio, and I hear Mayday, 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 and I'm still trying to say it's me. It's Dallalio. I'm on the first floor by the stair. Like those are all the things that are running through my mind because I mean, if I was there for longer, if I was out in a minute and 30, I had him in my face at probably 15 seconds, and it
Wow.
wasn't from the Mayday. He was inside the structure before the Mayday was called. He knew exactly what had happened when I fell, and it's really lucky, some of the things I could have been hurt a lot more because the way that I fell almost head first and did a somersault down to the first floor, and I could have very easily have fallen, hit my head,
Sure, yeah.
and stuff like that. But I don't. I as we learn, our department we trained, multiple times a year on RIT, and I feel like we're a pretty good RIT department. We make sure that on structure fires that is established, on every structure fire and soon in the operation. And we trained on that, and I have 100% confidence that if things were different and say that was not in a very open area where I'd fallen, I have full confidence that the crews that work with us and in the surrounding cities, we have trained together in RIT. We do joint company training, and I think that's crucial. Working on the difficult task of air replacement, mask replacement. Those are fine tuned skills that are very difficult to do on someone that can't help themselves.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I luckily that wasn't a scenario that had to be taken, steps that didn't have to be taken in my situation. But I never doubted in my mind. I fell from the first floor; they're about to pull me out. That's what happened. When I slipped and I fell, as soon as I went over the edge, it's like, oh, this is it. This may be my last call. It was, but I had already come to grips by the time I was laying on the floor that, I was getting out. That was never
Hmm.
that was never even in question. I have full confidence in every guy that I got working beside me when it's time to go to work. And I think that just goes to the culture, of the mature guys, the older tailboards, to not blow off training, not sit, idle, at the station when there's nothing going on. At least talk about it. If we're burnt, from running calls, at least talk about the calls. That's still
Sure.
training
Yeah, yeah.
opportunity. I think that's an underutilized training event, and that the round table in the bay, the dinner table, like they talk about, solving the world's problems at the firehouse kitchen, but it's solving, day to day calls that may be easy, but if you don't know how, it's not going to work out. And so, just talking about it and being willing to talk, because I mean, some guys want to escape to their room or go work out, but hanging out with each other and talking about calls is a invaluable piece of training. And as we're building, like we have this discussion all the time, like what's kind of hurting the culture of camaraderie within the station. And all of our stations are spread out. Like we got these massive
Yeah.
stations in Farmers Branch where everyone's got their own room and everyone's got their own bathroom, or what I'm not, maybe not their own bathroom, but you know what I'm saying. They disperse after a
Yep.
meal. They, oh, we got to clean. Oh, we clean. We do this, and then we go do our own thing. And I think that the old school, we all sleep together, we all eat together, and we go to work together. That's kind of getting
That's the
pushed.
firehouse, man. Like that's what the
Exactly.
firehouse should be. Yeah. Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm with you on that.
Exactly.
One thing I wanted to mention you or bring up, you mentioned this earlier in the story, and I wrote this down because this kind of stuck out to me. So when I'm sorry, you'll have to correct me. Was it you said it was your battalion chief is the one that came to you to drag you out? So he
Hmm.
said, "Do you want me to drag you by your hands or your feet?" Right?
Yeah.
So this is something I want the listeners to think about, right? Maydays, RIT situations, that's one of the most intense, hardest parts of our job, right? You hear that Mayday on an incident you're working on, and you're immediately going to be extremely elevated and excited, adrenaline, all that stuff, right? And if you're the one that comes up to the Mayday fireman, maybe you should take a breath yourself and think about this, right? Because I mean, he could have very easily just fucking grabbed you, swung you around, and potentially injured you further, right?
Hmm.
And I think there's a lot of guys who would have done that inadvertently, like like
Hmm.
obviously that's not intentional, but Yeah, so I want people to kind of keep that in mind. Like, don't be part of the problem. Try to keep yourself calm. And if they're awake, they're conscious, they can talk to you. Ask them what they need.
Hmm.
Maybe they can assist you in their removal or whatever the case is. So maybe that's a testament to him with his years on the job, experience, whatever. But I think that was a really heads up move by him.
Yeah, it's Chief Jerry Cromer, and he's a relatively young guy for the amount of years he's got. He's 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 a very very smart, and he's a great fireman. You know, he also retired, I think, with over 20 years from the Air Force. So he's he just he just a he's a, he saw the need, he stepped in, and I didn't feel as if I was getting yanked around or, getting bullied out of the building. They just pulled me out. I owe him a lot. He taught me a lot. He's one of those guys that he was down to train whenever, and when I started, he had just made captain at Farmers Branch, and we weren't even on the same shift, but when I worked on his shift, he poured into his guys, and I think that, Farmers Branch has always had that. They always had, for the most part, officers who cared about the operation, and they wanted guys that operated efficiently with good moral compass, and that's what being a fireman is like, doing the right thing, even when it requires more work,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
I just, you sit back and you lament over your career, even though it's only 10 years at Farmers Branch, but you think about like all the guys that have poured into you, and all the things leading up to each individual circumstance that you ran into. And, you got to be a sponge, got to constantly just be aware of your surroundings. And as young kids coming in, or we in the metroplex, we have a lot of lateral transfers at this point, where guys put 2 3 years in one department, and then they'll
Hmm.
go work at a different department. But um, never, never knowing it all, and always continually figuring things out. And that's what being a fireman is. You're a problem solver first, and that's what I love most about the job, is constantly thinking of different ways and better ways, and training yourself to resolve situations that you can't train for. And I think you saw it even in that call. That battalion chief, you know, some departments may have slapped him on the wrist for coming in. That wasn't your responsibility, Jerry. Chief Cromer, that you shouldn't have done that. You freelanced, or you did, X, Y, and Z.
Nope, he got it
I
done.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, our department, just so if my department's watching, the chiefs and such are watching, I'm not saying we did. We took care of Chief Cromer because he did the right thing when it was time. He didn't train that. He didn't be like, all right, this training, I'm gonna be safety here, and if this happens, I'm gonna do this.
Hmm.
No, he just saw a need, and he stepped in and he fixed a problem when something arose. And I mean, as someone who wants to get better, that should be what you train for, is find ways to be useful in ways that you can't really train. And that just takes you being in a constant state of observation of guys that are doing it the right way. And that's basically it. You constantly work on things. In order to be a good fireman, if you know you're lacking in an area, you correct it, right? And that that's just part of it. You just always constantly getting better. And I think your podcast has harped on this before. Is just, never be a coward to train, and never put off things you can do today. And just, I mean, as a fireman, I wish every day that I could continue and go back in and hang out with the guys, and just do cool stuff, and whatever the day
Yeah.
brought, and I that I think about that on a daily basis, and
I'm
as
I'm
as
sure.
you, yeah, as you would think that, because sometimes I'm sure it crosses your mind, what would happen if, I didn't have this. Well, I can tell you on this side that, there's days that it really stinks, and so, I'm in a good place now, but, I still miss being a fireman, each and every day. That was, I felt like that was a calling of mine, and I wanted to fulfill that, and I wanted to work 30 years. I wanted to, retire as an officer. I wanted to be someone when I retired, they said, you know what, he was good.
Hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
He was good. You don't say anything other than that. He's a good fireman. That's really
I think
all I
that's the
really ever
ultimate goal
wanted.
for most of us, you know.
Yeah, I
Um,
think I, I think that's it. And because there are guys that retire that they could really care less. They could care less what was said about them. They did their time, and now they're retired. They get to go play golf, go do whatever. I mean, the good's got to outweigh the bad in your department. And if it's not, you're a young guy, and there's no one helping you out get better. You probably need to find a different department. That's for young guys coming up. And luckily, I never had that problem. I never had that problem whatsoever. And I had opportunities in my career where I thought about, maybe relocating my family, but I could never leave the department,
well, it sounds
no
like
matter how.
you were part of a pretty stand-up department. Like
Yeah,
everything you're explaining to me, it sounds like the guys are stand-up. Um,
yeah.
the way that you guys operate is what I think most of us look for. So nobody blames you
hmm
for not leaving there. What was your recovery like? So how long between the end
So,
to the point when you realized you had to retire?
so I had spent 5 days in the hospital. I fractured L1, two, and three, and I lost in I think L1 or L2. I've lost like 50% of height, and so that it took a few days to kind of figure that out. What's this going to look like? And at first they're like, "Hey, it's looking pretty good." The surgeon come in and he's like, "Hey, it could be 6 months, it could be 18 months, recovery." And so he goes, "Everybody's different. You're young. I think that you can go back to work." So I just put that in. I was like, "All right, I'm going back." And so I was bedridden for I can't remember now. It felt like 6 months, but it was it was the first like 4 weeks. I could only get up for like 5 minutes, and then I had to be laying down or sitting reclined. So I laid. I spent most days laying around for the majority of that time, and then we slowly. I wore a back brace that went clear up to here that I wore if I was up. And I had a walker for about a week. And once I got the green light, I hit it hard. I made sure that I did not do anything. I got three young kids at the time. At the time, they were 6, 4, and 7 months old. And so you can imagine the amount of strain that puts
Yeah.
on my wife. But it was a bad and a good time. We got stronger because of it. But another thing is we lived in Waxahachie, which is over an hour away from the hospital I was transported to. So all my doctor's visits, I had to go back. But I went through 3 months, over 30 sessions of PT. I made it back, and I was going back. I'd already told the surgeon put me back on shift, and he's like, "Are you still experiencing pain?" I was like, "Yeah." And when I say I'm ready to go back, I could complete the physical, the fit for duty that we have every year. That was what I was going to have to complete to come back. That was all I was training. I would train to do that, but I wasn't doing the constantly sitting, the driving, the impact of getting on and off the engine,
Hmm.
bending down, picking up hose, those type things, where or I had to pull a fan off the engine or something where it had been awkward. I would train some of that, but he said, "Are you having any pain?" I said, "Yeah, I still have pain. At the end of every day, I got pain." And he's like, "Well, I don't think you're completely healed." So I went back to light duty for 3 days, I think. and I had a doctor's appointment. He cleared me for light duty, and he called me back. He says, "No, we're taking you back off." And so the reason why I couldn't really do light duty is I was having to drive an hour to work every day, and he didn't want me sitting that long in a car. So it kind of just kept lingering, and I'm like, "Hey, let's go back. I'm ready to go back." I was telling the guys, "Hey, I'm coming back," and they're like, "Yeah, we're ready to go, baby," and I had full intentions on coming back, and the pain just never really went away. Like even today, if I got a job, I do sales now. I drive around in my truck. I sit. I don't lift hardly anything, and every day I got to come home and lay down. And there was one point where it kind of hit me as I was set to have a doctor's visit, and the doctor's like, "All right." I was like, I'm ready to go all the way back." And he was like, "All right, well, I want you to start, working a full day around the house, do everything." Because I mean, I wasn't going to work. I wasn't doing light duty. I wasn't doing nothing. So I started doing things around the house, and I had a buddy come over, and he was helping me. He was helping me hang some fascia on the house, and I didn't really lift anything. I need a drill. Okay, here you go. Let's move this ladder. And I'd get up and I'd hold, maybe hold a board in place or something. I wasn't lifting anything heavy, nothing over 5, 10 pounds, right? And which was all within the scope, of me being off. And at the end of that day, the next day I couldn't move. I was sore. My back was just blown up, and I kind of knew then it's probably not going to happen. And that was a full year, a year and 2 weeks, because I got hurt in October, and I retired October 31st. And I went and saw the doctor the last time. I took my wife, and my wife, he was like, "I'm going to advise you not to do this." He goes, "You will have surgery in the future. Your back is aged 40 years in 1 year. And so you will have a 4-level fusion, and as you well know, TCFP, which is Texas Commission on Fire Protection, they recommend, or their recommendation is no fusion. I think 2 or more. Well, this is going to be a 4-level fusion, and he goes, it's whenever you can't handle the pain anymore, you will have surgery, and it will end your career. And he goes, I don't know, I don't know if it's going to be a month. I don't know if it's going to be a year. And I just thought, all right, I can go work 24 hours and recover, and then it just wasn't going to work out. I got kids that I want to grow old with. I want to play ball with them. I want to go and do things like that. I have full function of my body within reason that I could be a fireman for a few hours each and every day, but it would be a one and done thing. And I mean, I can't rely on I can't rely on the crew. Your guys will, "Hey, come back, man. We'll take care of you. We'll make sure you don't got to do anything." Blah 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 blah. And it's like, I can't do that to y'all. I don't want to be a liability.
Yeah.
And it was as simple as that. And it was a hard decision, and it beat me up for a couple of weeks. And I'm a believer in God, and we had a friend. It was an acquaintance at best, but my wife's friend. I did some roofing on the side. He had moved here in January in the city I live, and took over a roofing supply house. And he goes, "Man, I got a good job for you, and you would be good at it. You can talk, and that's all it is. You be talk and you answer your phone. If you can do that, you can make decent money." And that's all I saw. I was like, now I don't know anything else. I got an associate's degree and about 65 hours of fire science hours to show for what I could go into, prevention or something like that, and make a decent living. But hopefully, this has the trajectory that I could work, 20, 30 more years. When at the fire department, there's no way I could show up there 8 to 5 right now, like,
Yeah.
and sit, and it would just wear me out, and then drive, an hour home, or even if we move. But yeah, that's just this how it went down.
There's no shame in
It
doing the thing that's best for your family. You know what I mean? So,
Exactly. And I think that, everything fell into place, and this all happened. It just was meant to be. I was meant to run this course, and now I try to help people just, see things as, things happen. You just got to make the best out of it, right? And as a fireman, you got to do that for someone each and every day. The decisions you make on the fire ground, on the back of the ambulance, are going to change someone's life or their loved ones forever. And that's why you train, and that's why you put the best foot forward, because if not, it's going to lead to depression. It's going to lead to regret. It's going to lead to you going down some dark holes for not being prepared to do what you're supposed to do. And I think you're seeing that in some regards in the fire service. You're seeing depression go up. You're seeing people with just, feeling like they've let down someone in the biggest way possible. Not negligibly, but in that when they look back, like, man, I was trained on that, or we learned that in paramedic school, and I just didn't see it because I'm not fresh on it, or I see that, and I think that from the outside looking in now, looking back at times where I could have been better. But at the same time, when someone asks me about the fire service, it's the best job you can have. You get to do something that could change somebody's life forever. And as long as you show up and you put the work in, you can go home at the end of the day and hold your head up high. And
Yeah.
I think that's why we do it, and that's why y'all continue to do it, is that you're drawn to that. You want to be able to step in and change somebody's day for the better.
Jonathan,
Yeah,
you have an incredibly positive outlook on this. So,
appreciate it.
I'm not happy that it happened to you, but I'm happy that you're able to look at it from this point of view now. So,
Yeah,
I still think there's room for you in the fire service doing something, just like this or whatever, man. Take your experience and pass it on to others, and that's awesome. So again, thank you very much for coming on
yeah,
here,
no
telling
problem.
your story, passing on the lessons. It's pretty incredible, and I'm glad I heard it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for hearing me
Anything
out.
else? Anything else you want the audience to know before we end
Uh,
this?
yeah, sure. I just pour into your department, man. It is what you make it, and look out for each other. And I mean, it's a brotherhood. It's called that for a reason. And everyone's going to fall into hard times. There's going to be hard times, personally and in your career, and you got to have guys you can turn to and ask questions that are hard questions. That's what I would say. You be ready for it to be your last shift. That's about it. I mean, work every shift like it's your last. That's all I
Awesome.
got to say. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to end this. Don't go
Hmm.
anywhere, okay? All right. Thank you guys very much for joining me on this episode of the Monday Maydayology podcast. A special thanks to Jonathon Dallalio for joining us and telling his story. Real quick before we go, guys, don't forget to, wherever you're following this podcast at, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, make sure you're following, you do all the likes, the subscribes, the ratings, the shares. And please share this so we can continue to grow this podcast. I'd really appreciate it. And with that, everybody stay safe, and we'll see you on the next one.